So welcome everyone to this webinar on urban rural flows and how these urban rural flows due to seasonal tourism and second homes affect Nordic municipalities. I hope everyone can hear me all right. I'm going to switch to this presentation. So, welcome everyone that I know from before and to all that I haven't met yet. Nice to meet you all. We have been inviting you to this webinar to present to you some results from our Nordic Council of Ministers thematic group project about seasonal tourism and second homes in the Nordics. My name is Elin Slätmo, and I am a senior research fellow here at Nordic. I have worked with this study in around a year, and I've done that together with my colleagues Johannes Lidmo, Louise Ormstrup Westergård, and Eva Turunen. The agenda of today's webinar. Agenda of today's seminar or the webinar is that I will present the results from the Nordic study. Then we will have some time for questions or comments to the results and study. And then we will follow up with a discussion session, depending on how many questions you have or what type of comments you have. So let's start the presentation of this study. So the rationale behind this investigation that we have done in the Nordic countries is that flows of people and the second home phenomena for regional development is still not fully considered in policy and spatial planning. And one reason for that is that second homes and seasonal tourism implies linkages between urban and rural areas, which complicates these categories used in statistics. Therefore, population projections and public policies tend to ignore the temporary population. This is somewhat a background for why we in this study have focused on the second homes and seasonal tourism as a spatial planning challenge. And spatial planning, I'm using that term here for both the more strategic planning and the land use planning. Combined, I'm seeing them here as spatial planning. We have in this study then investigated what type of problems public actors in the spatial planning need to handle when they are including the voluntary temporary inhabitants into strategic and land use decisions. This we have done by focusing on a number of research questions. We have studied in what sense are the second homes and seasonal tourism urban? In what sense are they rural? We have investigated how can the urban-rural flows of people be characterized in different ways. We have also investigated what type of planning challenges that the seasonal tourism and second homes cause. And in the following, we have also investigated what strategies are the municipalities using to handle these challenges. The team, myself and my team, we have worked with a mixed method approach to try to answer and investigate these questions. That means that we have read and got a state-of-the-art overview of the literature on the topics in the Nordics. How are planners and planning in the Nordic countries handling second homes and seasonal tourism? We have also gone into statistics and using statistics for spatial analysis, and we have focused on more in-depth questions or investigations in 5 case studies, and 1 in each Nordic country. In these case studies, we have done interviews with public authorities and with politicians, and in some instances also private actors that are working with tourism. We have done observations, taken pictures, done document studies of different kinds. The 5 cases are characterized that they have, in their respective countries, they have a large amount of second homes. They are therefore they have large flows of people coming there on an annual basis, although they are not registered permanently there. So therefore we would say we are seeing them, or at least I'm seeing them, as the most experienced municipalities when it comes to handling second homes and seasonal tourism. The cases that we have investigated or done studies with, it's Odsherred in Denmark, it's Pargas or Parainen in Finland, it's Grimsnes and Grafnisreppur in Iceland, it's Noreg-Uvdal in Norway, and it's Härjedalen in Sweden. I will come back to that later. To understand what is going on, we have also investigated the national levels in these respective countries. And finally, we have done a combined analysis to see what type of Nordic added value we can get from studying the countries and the municipalities together in a Nordic perspective. So first, I would like to start to tell you about the first 2 questions, those regarding the urban or rural dimensions, urban and rural dimensions. And what a Nordic overview tells us. As you all know, the urbanization is how we talk about the Nordic areas or the Nordic populations, that the urbanization is the trend in the Nordic region, that we haven't had any large-scale urban to rural permanent migration. And one of the reasons, or one of the explanations for that, is that the quality of life motives for moving to the countryside is rather satisfied by an extensive access to second homes. These people that live in or own and use second homes are currently discussed in the research as voluntary temporary inhabitants. And I think that's a term that I want to mention for you, so you know that that's why I'm using that term. On a Nordic level, other researchers around the Nordics have done estimations on how many people that have second homes and have access to second homes. And such estimation shows that around half of the Nordic population of 27 million people have access to a second home, either via ownership or that they have access via family or friends. So it's a large share of the population that are using the second homes. The previous studies in the Nordic countries also shows that the second homes are used increasingly year-round, during weekends and holidays, and not only as it was perceived previously only during either summer or winter season, but now it is used frequently during the whole year. And we are using second homes for different reasons, both for the more short-term stays during a weekend, or more longer term, that you move to a second homes during the summer months, for instance. looking at the definition of what a second home is, it means traditionally in the Nordic countries, detached house, often in a rural area, where no one is permanently registered. And I will come back to that, but we have seen in the field work we have done for this study that it's almost impossible to tell if a house is used as a second home or as a permanent home, only by visually looking at the area or at the house. Secondly, we have also investigated why the Nordic people use or own a second home. And the previous studies indicate 4 main non-exclusive motivations for having a second home. It's about social bonding with family and friends, to have a place that you can come back to year after year that is used together. It's about escaping the busy urban life or escaping your everyday life. It's about access to nature and recreational activities in nature and in green areas of different kinds, both hiking and skiing, bathing, and so on. These type of recreational activities. In recent years, the Nordic research have also focused on the fact that second homes in some instances are used as investments, and that is something that is coming forward in some of the cases we have studied quite clear. Now I will try to go into the statistics and the spatial analysis that Eva Turunen has helped us with for this project. And where then are the second homes located on a Nordic scale level? The statistical analysis based on statistics from 2017 shows that the main areas for second homes, both in numbers and in relation to permanent inhabitants, are in Denmark, the northern Sjælland and the west coast of Jylland. In Finland, it's the mid-eastern lake areas and the southwest archipelago, also including the Åland Islands. In Iceland, it's the municipality in proximity to or in the urban peri-rural areas of Reykjavik in south of Iceland. In Norway, it's predominantly in the southern mountain areas in Uppland and Buskerud fylke. And in Sweden, it's in the southern mountain areas in Dalarna and Jämtland, and in the Stockholm archipelago, and also in northern Öland especially. Also Gotland is quite strong in having many second homes. On an average on the Nordic level, you can see that there are around 67 second homes per 100, sorry, I'll take that again. It's about 67 second home per 1,000 inhabitants in the Nordic countries. And all these maps, of course, will be shared with you afterwards if that would be of interest. What then have happened over time when it comes to second home development in the Nordic countries? You can see here on the map on the right that we have done analysis on the second home development from 2010 to 2017. And this map illustrates the changes of the numbers of second homes, where the blue dots represent where there has been an increase, and the red tones, are where it has been a decrease of second homes. And the area that stands out as the most dominant increase in the Nordic is Vestfold in Norway, where the growth was strongest with them all, and that has due to that they have around 3,000 more second homes in 2017 than in 2010. We can also see that the growth are stronger. There is an increase of second homes on a Nordic average and general level. But we can also see that we have some areas where the second homes are decreasing, and we were a bit interested in why that is, because the trend would be that they would be increased. So we contacted Statistics Sweden to have a discussion on that, and together with them we found out that it's 3 plausible reasons for why the second homes are decreasing in some areas. And first of all, it could be the reason that the houses has been abandoned or teared down for different reasons, that the standard is not high enough for keeping it. Or second, it could be a reason that the houses had been turned into a permanent home. And thirdly, that the statistics from the housing registers include some kind of errors, in that sense that the people that are reporting in the second homes have different definitions of what a house is. So that is the 3 main plausible reasons for that. Arve Vannebo asking a question here, how about the increase in the mountain areas in Buskerud and Uppland? Yeah, that is, of course, as you can see here on the map, these the southern mountain areas. It is increasing a lot. What I mentioned about Vestfold was that apparently that was standing out as the most strongest one if you looked between 2010 and 2017. But we are aware that this area, southern mountain areas, are increasing a lot. That you have establishment there that it is more second homes built than permanent homes built. That is another type of dimension there. Yeah. So one of the questions that we have investigated in this project is how to include the voluntary temporary population in the spatial planning. How to include the second home owners, second home users, and the seasonal tourism in the planning. And why are we interested in that? Because of the fact that you have to consider seasonal tourism second homes in order to estimate and make projections on the demand for local, public, and private services. So these voluntary temporary population has to be included in the planning for these types of services and welfare services and public and private services and infrastructure. And previous research tells us that these voluntary temporary populations are still today ignored in a very large extent in the policy and planning in the Nordic countries. I think we prove ourselves wrong there a bit, because we have some good responses from our cases, but still on a general level it's still quite ignored in the policy and planning. And the reason for why it's important to include the voluntary temporary population is that, of course, the provision of public services such as infrastructure, waste treatment, on social services is today currently often based on census data that record people as living in one place only, that are permanently living somewhere, and do not include these flows of people. So how to solve this, how to show the actual flows of people that is ongoing in the Nordic countries. One way to do that was developed by our former colleague from Norway, John M. Steinecke, in 2007, and we have used the same model in this project, and that is a community impact index. And this community impact index, it illustrates the impact of the temporary inhabitants, the second home inhabitants, to the municipality. And it's calculated, you take the annual population in relation to the permanent population, and through that you can see how large impact the second home owners or the voluntary temporary population has on the community that you're studying. So on this map, this community impact map illustrates where in different ways the impact. It illustrates the impact of the second homes on the local community. Here it is on the municipal level. So a Nordic average is that the community impact by second home users was 1.2, so a bit over, a bit above. The annual population is therefore larger than the permanent population naturally. But in some areas, mostly the rural areas and mostly areas where we have a low permanent population, the annual population is so large, so they have a large impact. On a municipal level, we can see on a Nordic average that we have in the highest community impact can be found from Skorradalsreppur in Iceland, in Grimsnäs and Grafningsreppur in Iceland, and also in Kustavi in Finland. It's a bit small here on the map. These are areas where the community impact exceeds a ratio of 10, so it's a very high impact because the annual inhabitants due to second homes are very large in comparison to the permanent population. Southern Savonia in Finland is the region with the highest regional community impact. And from other Nordic countries, we have the regions of Söderland in Iceland. Sorry. Regions of Söderland in Iceland and Uppland in Norway, and Jämtland Härjedalen in Sweden, where we have this analysis shows that the community impact is very high. So what does this community impact means then in a more qualitative way of discussing the impacts? I'm just going to let Johanna let someone into the room. The community impact of second homes is importantly both positive and negative. It's negative in that sense that you can see in which areas more people are using infrastructure and services than counted for in the permanent population statistics. But it's also positive because these voluntary temporary populations are clearly a drive for local and regional job creation, for regional and local consumption, and for different demands of events. I found it, we can talk about this later, but I found this very interesting to show it on the map because you get another type of overview of the Nordic population flows. We have got a question here from Torun Kornstad about the region Söderösterland in Hilmark. At this point, I don't think I should go into the details of all the different regions about this community impact, but we can have a dialogue about it afterwards if you are interested in that, because we of course have the figures and it will be published in the report about where you are at in this map. Let's see. So this was one way for us to try to investigate the urban-rural flows of people, and another way to try to do that, we got inspiration from studies both in Norway and in Finland, because we have research results from Norway and Finland that it's in those countries we have counter-urbanization processes ongoing, and we wanted to figure out if these counter-urbanization processes was also ongoing on a Nordic regional level, so to say, with all the Nordic countries combined. So therefore, we did this analysis that is presented on this slide, on this figure. And what we have done here is that we have taken, sorry, now someone wants to get in there. Yeah. What we have done here is that we have taken the Eurostat statistics on urban to their continuum from urban to rural categories. Eurostat have 5 different categories when it comes to urban-rural statistics. And these are here in this figure showed in different colors. So the more red the colors are, the more urban it is. And so I can go through them and see. In the most red one, it's predominantly urban. The yellow one is intermediate region, close to a city. No, sorry, the pink one is intermediate region, close to a city. The yellow one is intermediate region, but it's remote from the city. The light green one is predominantly a rural region, but it's close to a city. And the darkest green, it's predominantly rural, but it's considered as remote in the Eurostat statistics. What we have done then with these 5 categories of the urban-rural continuum is that we have combined it with 4 different indicators. So from the left here in the figure, it shows the population in permanent houses or permanent homes in the Nordic countries. So from this first pillar in the figure, from the first pillar from the left, you can see that people are in the Nordic countries are dominantly living permanently in urban areas, in urban or in intermediate regions. At the second pillar from the left, you can see that that's where the second homes are located. And here you can see that the second homes are located both in urban and in rural areas, but predominantly in a little bit more in rural areas. So combining these 2 pillars, you can see that when people are going from their urban permanent homes to their second homes, they are going in a general sense to from their urban area to a rural area. So it's a one way to illustrate the flows of people. The third pillar in this figure shows where the increase of second homes are located. And we can see that most of the increase of second homes between the years 2010 and 2017, it's in the intermediate region, it's 8%. But also, if you're combining the 2 rural categories that Eurostat has, you see that's also quite heavy in the rural areas. So that's where we have the increase where it's located. The fourth pillar shows the community impact and combining that with the urban to rural categories. And here, this analysis indicates that it's a higher community impact in rural areas. So, and this is a map. I will not go into this map now, but you can have a look at it later if you want to. It's where these 5 urban to rural categories are illustrated on the map. So how is using these statistics from Eurostat, how your region is categorized as either urban or rural or in between on this continuum. In summary, this analysis is indicating that it is a continuous counter-urbanization process that is ongoing in the Nordic region. And that this has even been called an invisible counter-urbanization process because it's not shown in the permanent population figures that is usually used when you are doing population prognosis, when you are doing basis for policy and planning. So therefore it's called an invisible type of counter-urbanization process. this stream of people going from urban to rural areas. One example of these invisible flows that have a positive impact we have found in Nordic municipality, where they have a food store open on Sundays. And this is a picture on that food store. It's a kiwi store that is open on Sundays, very much thanks to the voluntary temporary inhabitants that keeps the basis for consumption high enough to enable to have this large food store, and also that it's open on Sundays. So that's one of the positive impacts. Other types of positive impacts that voluntary temporary populations have on the on the local and the regional level is that they maintain social life, they maintain demand for local services, they encourage economic activities, they support local employments, and if they are recognized as inhabitants by the public actors doing spatial planning, they can also give input to the planning and strategy work. As a bit of a summary now from this Nordic overview that I have started to present for you, I would like to say that there is no strict divides between the urban and rural areas, between the permanent residents and the voluntary temporary residents. Those type of dichotomies does not reflect the whole picture of society. There are no activities that are typical for permanent residents and voluntary temporary residents respectively. We are mostly doing the same type of thing when we are either permanent or voluntary temporary residents in an area. Secondly, the digitalization and digital solutions of different kinds enable people to stay more frequently in their second homes and to stay more in their rural second homes, although their workplaces might be located in an urban area. This is also something that indicates this need to look beyond the strict divides between urban and rural areas. And as I mentioned to you before, we have found it in some of the areas we have been visited for this project that it might be impossible to set out or to depict a second home from a permanent home. Now it's a question from Anna-Stina Sarlin. If we will share the presentation afterwards. So yes, you can download it afterwards. Thomas wondered, have you studied or intend to study to what extent we actually see people working from the second homes? We have not included that in our studies. The focus has mainly been on the spatial planning perspective. So we haven't in this study been able to focus on the second home users or the voluntary temporary population. But we know that studies are ongoing and have been done on that topic. So what are people actually doing? This statement that there's no activities that are typical for permanent residents and voluntary temporary residents, it comes actually from a Finnish study that has done it in depth with activities that are second home users, what they are doing when they are there and how often they are in the second homes and so on. But we also have these results from Sweden and from Norway as well. They are doing a lot of these types of studies. So the references. Yes, the references are included in the end of the PowerPoint presentation, and we will also of course, include it in the report that we will publish during the year. So I will go into the second part of this presentation, and that is that we should learn some from the most experienced municipalities. and we have done field work in the case studies, in 5 case studies in the Nordic countries. I'm sorry, it's a question there again. Is it? What is that? Okay, yeah. Anna-Stina Salin is commenting that in the southwest archipelago in Åboland, in Pargas, it is estimated that the second homes are used around 80 to 90 days per year. So that is an answer for Thomas there. So going into the results from the most experienced municipality that I have chosen to call them here, from our cases, we have investigated in depth how the spatial planning and actors in these municipalities are working with second homes and seasonal tourism. And this we have done to investigate the challenges and the strategies in relations to second homes and seasonal tourism. In the report that I mentioned that we will publish, each country has its own subchapter, and we have a national governing overview in that subchapter, and then we have done an analysis for each respective municipality in the country. Today I will shortly present some perspectives on voluntary temporary populations from our cases. So first we are going to Denmark, and in Odsherred in Denmark, and let's see, in Odsherred in Denmark, and in Odsherred, the director of Visit Odsherred in January 2019, this person said like this: the 25,000 second homes in our municipality are the core of the entire service sector and trade. You can almost only underestimate how important they are. In total, one second home has the same meaning for the local economy as one permanent citizen has in average for an entire year. It says something about how dependent the economy is of the second homes. Going further to Parainen in Pargas in Finland. Here, one of the officials in Pargas municipality said like this: right now, if a bus with tourists comes during the high season, we can have a bit of a challenge to house them all in one location within the municipality. And the business owner are a bit reluctant to collaborate with each other, even if the neighboring bed and breakfast have beds. I mean, it's usually solved by directing the tourists to another municipality in the region, but for our local economy, further work is needed on this. With our new employees within tourism, we arrange seminars for businesses in order to enhance their collaborations. We have also been in Iceland, and in Iceland, one of the officials working at Grimsnes and Grafningsrepper municipality says like this: I would not say that it would be that much seasonal, because we have tourists all year round. We are in South Iceland, which means that most of the people coming to Iceland are coming to South Iceland. And further, the project manager at Visit South Iceland says at least 70% of all tourists who come to Iceland come to the south. Going further to Norway, one of the employees in the Nordic Business Center says like this: the reality in Norway is that people move from the cities to the rural areas in weekends and vacations. But they are moving public services away from the rural areas, and this is a challenge. The local politician in Nordic follow up like this: we do not want to have property taxes. because we see it as a competitive advantage to not have it. In the surrounding municipalities, they have introduced this tax. It is just our municipality that has not. And finally, we are going to Sweden in Härjedalen. And a planner in Härjedalenberg municipalities says like this: that we have a lot of tourists leads to more shops in settlements than we normally would have. We have more services in those settlements. If we would not have the tourism industry, there would not be even 3,000 inhabitants in the municipality. I have included these types of citations to give you a flavor of the way that the spatial planners and the actors and politicians are talking about and thinking about and handling the seasonal tourism and the second homes. In the report, we also have more detailed analysis from each of the cases. Here today, I will focus on the combined analysis that we have done. So what we have done in the country and cases shows that we have very different situations of both the effects and the impacts that the second homes and the seasonal tourism have between the countries, between national and local contexts. But on a Nordic average level, we also see some similarities, and these are the ones that I will focus on here today. We have some common themes and common challenges, and I have identified 5 challenges as shared between 2 or more of the Nordic cases, and I will go through them now, and we will see if you can recognize yourself or if you can see other challenges in your cases you are working with. So the first and most dominant challenge that all the respondents in all the Nordic countries that we have talked to, that they have in common is that the infrastructure and welfare system is not adapted to a mobile population. And the physical and digital infrastructure, as well as the welfare system, such as school, childcare, elderly care, health sector, planning department, waste, sewage. These infrastructure and welfare services are primarily formed after the permanent population figures, although a much larger population use it during the year. And to find a balance to satisfy both the permanent population and the temporary population is considered challenging in all the Nordic countries. As an example, we can say that also that respondents in the Norwegian and the Icelandic municipalities, they found it somewhat challenging to establish the right type of dialogue with the temporary population. But they are working on it. It's not that. It's just they find it a bit challenging. Moreover, the second challenge that we have identified that is combined, or that is common between the Nordic municipalities that we have studied, are that the rules and regulations are not adapted to a mobile population. That means that the public administrative system is adapted to a fixed permanent population and not to a population that flows between different places during the year. In our study, this was indicated as a challenge in Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden, and by the respondents there. So, for instance, the respondents in Finland and Sweden, they note that the system that direct the income tax, which is the higher proportion of the tax, to the municipalities where the person is permanently registered as a resident. And this, of course, affects the resources that are available for the infrastructure and welfare system. Okay, I've got a question here. We'll see if I open it. I think we'll save that question until after we have done going through all the challenges. So the third challenge that we see as on the Nordic average level is let's see. No, I got a bit mixed up. Is that the rules and regulations are not followed by the voluntary temporary inhabitants. And this is challenging for the local and regional respondents, as it hinders the municipality's ability to provide services, and it takes also resources to inform the second homeowners and the temporary inhabitants on their responsibilities, on the rules that they have to follow in the municipality. For instance, we have the respondents have told us that people live in their second homes without registering it in them. People build new property without applying for the right permits. People rent out the second homes more than the prescribed days, and that the seasonal workers do not register in the municipalities they working during seasons. Now we got two questions here. Let's see. Hulda is asking if we do you take the renting out of the second homes, for example, through Airbnb, into account in your analysis? I know that is at least very common in Iceland, where second homes are rented out. Yeah, that is the Airbnb, and the renting out of second homes is something that has been considered very much, especially in the Icelandic case and for Iceland. So that is something that we have talked about a lot with the respondents, and we have taken that into consideration.
Yeah, that's one you just took.
And that is something that is challenging for the it's challenges for the public administration to handle, how to ensure that the people are renting out their second homes more than the prescribed days. Because in Iceland, for you that don't know that, they have a number of days that you're allowed to rent it out. It's 90 days per year, and that is regulated on the national level. But it's very hard for the local municipal level to ensure that the people are not renting it out more than prescribed days. I mean, we have similar rules also in Denmark and Sweden, for instance, that you're not allowed to rent out your second home more than a set number of days. You're not allowed to earn more money than a set amount. If so, you have to tax for that money, to pay taxes for it. And it's challenging to know who that has the right or responsibility to follow that up, to ensure that this is happening, that they are following the rules, so to say. We have a question about what about the Airbnb rent out in the cities? Yeah, I think Johannes will come back to that later, right? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, but yeah, that is of course also something that the Airbnb and these types of platforms that you can rent out and rent second homes in are of course making it more challenging for the public authorities to control. I have actually during this project tried to contact Airbnb and see if they could help us with some statistics, but they haven't replied. So I tried to get them into the project, so to say, and have a dialogue with them, but so far it has not been successful. So this was the third common challenge, so combined challenge. I will go further now and to the fourth one. And the fourth challenge is something that is shared between Iceland and Sweden especially, and it's a competition, the competition between the housing market and the market for guest nights. And the respondents in Iceland and in Sweden they highlight the competition on the housing market as challenging to deal with, but in slightly different ways. In Iceland, it's described as the competition between the second home rentals and on the one hand, second home rentals, and on the other hand, the hotels and guest houses that needs further monitoring from public administrations. And that is again this Airbnb phenomenon that people are renting out their second homes, and that tourists are coming there are renting a second home instead of using a hotel and a guest house. And that is something that is challenging to deal with, because renting these second homes or using them more than the prescribed days are challenging for the municipality to handle, because then the sewage system, the waste system, the water system, the roads are not adapted to these large flows of people. So from the respondents that we have been engaged with is that they are saying that they prefer tourists to use hotels and guest houses than renting a second home when you come to Iceland as a visitor, so to say. In Sweden, it is rather the competition between the new second homes establishments to build new second homes on the one hand, and on the other hand, to build new permanent homes. To find that right balance there is something that is expressed as a bit of a challenge. The fifth and final challenge that we have identified is that the respondents are worried about or think it's challenging to develop and implement sustainable tourism. And the worry or the challenge here is that the natural resources that attract tourists are too degraded with too many tourists, and to find the right balance of how many tourists are enough, that is the core of this challenge. And this, even though, as respondents in Norway and Sweden point out, for instance, that they found it a bit challenges, even though they have environmental and planning legislation in place, it's a bit challenging how to use it in the best way. And respondents from Norway say that the new constructions that these second homes establishments mean is that they are degrading the right of public access and the ecosystems in the landscapes. And this makes us state that this calls for a proactive and a long-term planning, to think in a long-term sense, and to find a sustainable balance of tourism development. Marianne, you ask if there is no experience with the competition issues in Denmark. And I mean, it's maybe I'm not the right person to answer that, because it's Louise who has done the interviews. But we haven't found that so clearly in the material, at least.
Yeah.
No.
Not from Aarhus municipality, at least. We
not
know
from
that the second homes that are on the west coast of Jutland have more issues with this, as the letting out tradition is larger there. But in the case study in Aarhus, no, this was not one of the challenges that they experienced. I hope you could hear that.
Yeah, I hope Marianne could hear that. Okay, it's hard. Mark says it's hard to hear. Okay, so what Louise was saying, that in Odsherred in Denmark, didn't find any, that wasn't raised in the interviews with the respondents, that it was a challenging, the competition. But we know that that has been experienced in other parts of Denmark, that you have this competition. What has come forth in the Danish material, the material from Odsherred, is that this right of public access is a bit challenging. That the second home owners are establishing different types of tree plantations and different types of routes, are hindering people to go through their plot in order to get access to the sea or to the ocean, to the beach. And that is, of course, challenges for the right of public access. But it's a competition between different types of housing markets wasn't clearly something that came forth in Odsherred. No, yeah, sorry. I thought it was another question, but we wait with that. Okay, so now I gone through the 5 challenges that we have found that identified as common between the Nordic countries, and I want to also present to you the strategies and actions that are used to turn these challenges into opportunities for local and regional development. And we have here divided them into hard government tools, targeted governance tools, and soft governance tools. So first of all, the second homes and seasonal tourism are in the Nordic countries are regulated by the range of different policy regimes in terms of laws and regulations, and that is what we call the hard government tools here. The seasonal tourism is not to the same extent regulated in laws and regulations, but it's on all the Nordic levels we have that in strategic documents and strategic on a national level documents that you want to have sustainable tourism. So to use these strategic efforts, to use the planning legislation, to use the environmental legislation is something that the municipalities that we have talked to, engaged with, are doing. They are using that as strategies and actions in order to handle the challenges, in order to develop the sustainable tourism. But of course, it can be a bit of a trick for them to do it in a situation basis, but they have these laws and regulations that they can use. Another hard government tool that are in use is property taxes for second homes, and we have property taxes for second homes in all the Nordic countries, or possibilities for it. In Sweden it's called a fee and not a tax. In Norway it's not mandatory to have for the municipality to have a tax on second homes property, as we heard before from the Norway Nordic have chosen to not have a property tax on second homes in order to attract more second home owners. So for them, they are using that as their way of attracting more people to build second homes. The strategic and land use planning is in all these cases we are interacted with something that is seen as a core hard government tool for them to use in steering and regulating the second home use and this seasonal tourism, in that sense that you can decide how large the houses should be, the sizes of the houses, and also in what context they are embedded. So you can choose in which area you are to develop new second home, new housing, and in which areas you are preserving. And that is something that you are, they are helped of. And having that, those type of strictly regulation on a paper and on a plan also help to have the actors come together and have this common document that they are using for dialogues together. We're going further to the targeted governance tools, and in the municipalities that we have studied, different types of targeted tools have been developed. For instance, we have flexible opening hours during the year. It's used both in service sectors, in restaurants, in pubs, but also in the health sector, that you have more doctors during high season, during the winter time or during the summertime, that are on call, and that is like flexibility in that sense. Work is also ongoing to maintain and develop the physical and digital infrastructure to keep up with the variances during the year. So they're trying to figure that out in the best way, how to keep that in a balanced way. Should also mention that Iceland do not have the same type of seasonal variation because of this large and massive tourism that has developed during the last decade. So the strategy seemed to be rather to prioritize certain routes and certain areas that have many visitors, to steer them in that direction, so to say, and to put up signs of different kinds and that type of strategies. In Härjedalen in Sweden, that's just one example. I think that was quite kind of interesting that they are working with a targeted strategy to prioritize the permanent population when it comes to the plot line, and also for the discounts on fees for the road maintenance. So if you're a permanent resident, you get a discount for the road maintenance. In that sense, you can then they are prioritizing the permanent population in that regard. When it comes to the third categories of different type of strategic ways that the municipalities are working with second homes and seasonal tourism, we have the soft governance tools, and in in the municipalities studied, we have type of informal committees and committees for dialogue in Odsherred in Denmark, in Pargas in Finland, and in Nord-Uvdal in Norway. And these committees for dialogue, it's basically that the municipality or the public actors are meeting with the second home owners and the second home users regularly. And that is, they're meeting in order to answer different types of questions of information and to inform them of the rules and the regulations in the municipality, but it's also to ease potential disputes of resource use, to get the face of someone that is working on for the municipality and vice versa, and also to harness the opportunity of second homeowners, to ask the second homeowners about their desires and the visions for the municipality, to get input for the public work. And thirdly, it seems also to be used in order to create awareness of the significance of tourism. So it's an important way to discuss in what way the tourism and the second homeowners are important for the regional and local economy. Further communications with other types of actors, not only between the public administration and the second homeowners, but also between the businesses, the politicians, and between different administrative units, are also mentioned as ongoing actions in the country cases that we have studied. So it's ongoing work with these collaborations in different ways. So some of the conclusions that we can draw from this study we have done is that in all 5 case studies, the interviewees stress that the second homes are overall a positive asset for the municipalities in terms of job creation, cultural activities or cultural events, and in terms of services. At the same time, it is proven challenging to adapt the welfare system and services to large flows of voluntary temporary inhabitants. And one of our suggestions or recommendation here is to try to identify the challenges together in a collaborative manner that can help to cope with them. So to sit down and discuss what the challenges that the specific municipality or region found with this voluntary temporary population, with the aim to not get stuck in the challenges, but to find context-adapted strategies and actions that can turn them into opportunities for regional and local development. On a more generic level, we also have conclusions, and that is that the second home mobility and the flows of people for seasonal tourism are both, in the same time, both urban and rural. So to uphold the division or dichotomy between urban and rural does not give room for a more complex understanding of the relation between municipalities. And as we have proven here, that is existing. At least our analysis give indications on that. And this motivates us to recommend that policymakers and decision makers should discuss if income taxes should be shared between municipalities based on the locations of the permanent and the second homes. And the main rationale behind this suggestion is that the infrastructure and welfare system then would be better adapted to the annual population. And with that, I thank you so much for listening to me and to the results of our study. And I wonder if you have any questions or comments to what you have heard. Mark Anton, you have asked if the second homeowners have the same expectation of services than they have for their urban home. That is of course something that differs, and it's variances in the second home stock, so to say. But we have indications. Let's see, which country was that from? That was from Sweden. Yeah, we have indications that these standards of the second homes are increasing. And we have, of course, still quite large variances in the second home stock, but that the standard of them, both in the size, the interiors, and the design of the houses, are increasing. That the standards are coming closer to the permanent homes, so to say. And one of the planners in Sweden, in Härjedalen, also said that that person had an impression that in some second homes they even have a better standard than in their permanent homes. Mark Anton, you also ask, where do people retire? Do they sell their urban homes and end up in their second home? No, I think that's a hard question to answer, actually. I will not guess on that one. We don't have that Nordic statistics on that on the Nordic average level, so I will not reply to that, so not say anything that is not correct. Thomas asks, second homes is an asset in those regions that is attractive enough to attract new second homeowners. However, this is only relevant for some areas in our periphery. How to handle that? Yeah, that is a good question. How can we handle that that people only want to have second homes in some areas but not in all areas? That is one for us. I don't know exactly how to respond to that, actually. I mean, it's a strategy for some regions that try to attract second home owners, and they are doing it quite well in these areas that we have studied here. So that is what we can speak for, so to say. In other areas, it could be harder to attract new ones. Thomas also comment that some urban areas, such as Uppsala, have agreements, contracts with more rural areas to buy welfare services for elderly people. This is an alternative to legislation, but can possibly be enhanced by national policy. Yeah, of course, to have some kind of agreements between municipalities. That is wise to have these type of cross-municipal relations in that sense when it comes to welfare services. Elisabeth Gruber says, thank you for the presentation. How do you think your proposal of sharing income taxes would be perceived by urban governments? Yeah, we hope it will be perceived by interests. Yeah, that's something that is an idea that has been developed during this process of this study, and it's a suggestion and it's open for more study, of course. Myself and none of my colleagues, we are not economists in that sense that we are into tax regulations, but based on solving this challenge for the municipalities that have a large annual population, we perceive that this would be a suitable solution. So hopefully national governments could listen to that. Let's see. What did you say? Hanna Mari, she asked, does any Nordic country collect taxes from voluntary temporary residents? Yeah, Johannes, do you want to reply to that, or?
The only thing I can... I'm not sure if there is a specific tax on the temporary population, but it is on second homes in some countries that you can actually have a property tax. So in that sense, especially in Sweden, when we changed legislation for property taxes in Sweden, what is it, maybe 10 years ago or something like that, it was a property tax going to the state, changed to a property fee going to the municipality. So for Härjedalen municipality, for instance, where I was interviewing some officials, they were saying that there is a remarkable change in the income coming directly to the municipality due to the change, even though I think the property fee in general is a bit lower because it has a limit of the maximum amount. But that can vary depending on the context where it's located. But that can be considered as some kind of tax from the voluntary temporary residents. But otherwise, I don't know if we have seen anything else, but no. I don't want to say it.
No, but we haven't. That's why the suggestion is about suggestion is that to distribute the income tax, based on the permanent homes, or the suggestion is a recommendation to discuss that further. Is it possible to split the taxes from the income, which is the largest share of the tax that we pay, between where you have the permanent home and where you have your second home? But that is not done yet in the Nordic countries. No, it's on property tax level.
I can add one thing also related to this when it comes to Sweden, for instance, that you can, if you, for instance, go to Härjedalen during the winter, you can actually, your children can go to school there, and you can transfer the fee from the home municipality to the temporary location. But the main challenge here in Härjedalen, as an example, is perhaps the capacity, to plan for the capacity of teachers and so on during this seasonal variations, because you can't only look at the population statistics. So it's also other options that you can transfer money in some of the Nordic countries for some sectors, for some public services, but it's also complicated when it comes to capacity planning and so on.
Thank you, Johannes. The region Gotland asks, is there any evidence of multi-use of second homes? Tourism in the summer, permanent housing for someone else in the winter? I guess that region Gotland, I think you might be a good person to answer that yourself, about the multi-use. As we haven't interviewed any users or second home owners in this study, it's a bit tricky for us to say that we have evidence on this. But of course, these houses are used for different purposes during the years. Yeah. Rikke says, thank you for a very interesting presentation. Thank you, Rikke, for engaging. I really enjoyed it. A comment question. In your calculation of community impact, you mainly consider voluntary temporary population as place consumers. However, in our study from Denmark and Sweden, we also see an important influence of certain... No. The question disappeared. Yeah.
It's a very long question.
They also see, so what did you say, Virke? So Rikke has done a study on...
Can we open this?
Yeah, should we try to change the room here to another one. So, yeah, so everyone can see the question now. Yeah. Is that how it is, Jana?
I don't think so.
Okay.
For some reason.
Okay, so I continue to read the question?
Yeah.
Okay. So Ricky says, in your calculation of community impact, you are mainly consider voluntary temporary populations as place consumers. However, in our study from Denmark and Sweden, we also see an important influence of certain voluntary temporary populations as place makers. Have you come across this in your study? And if so, how did municipalities engage with the voluntary temporary placemakers? Yeah, thank you so much for that question, Rikke. I know that you have done that study on Bornholm and Gotland as cases, and that is so true that the voluntary temporary populations are both place consumers, and that has been the main focus here. But we also see that they are place makers in that sense that they are engaging in and want to be part of this strategic and visionary work of the municipalities and the areas that they are staying in that sense that they are giving like demand for cultural events, they are creating different new types of economic activities, new restaurants, new concerts, and so on. And in that sense, they are place makers as well. And I think that's really something that we should continue to address and discuss. Do you want to comment on that,
Yes, I could comment on that.
Don't want to
Can you see me? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Regge, for the question. I would like to add to what Elin said that the study I did in Oshel municipality in Denmark, that they really also see how that they can engage the second home owners or the voluntary temporary population in making the place as well. And for that, they have set up a fund that only the second home owners can apply for in order for them to make either benches along the beach, if they have some ideas to make a new place in the second home area, as a way to make the place more interesting and also as a way to engage them as a type of citizen and show that the municipality really see them as valuable for the development in the municipality. So that is definitely one place that we saw that the municipality really took the potentials that the second home owners bring and made use of that by setting up this fund. Yeah.
Okay. Wasn't that also similar to the one in Norway? They had also fund, right?
That is true.
Yeah, Nordic, yeah.
Yes.
They also have a fund for development based on second home owners. Jana is asking, the shore protection law prohibits building close to the water. For example, in Kalmar County, this is seen as an obstacle for regional development. Is this something you have considered in your research? Yeah, this is something, for this study we haven't been focusing on the shoreline protection, but of course it's something that had came up during some of the interviews, that this shoreline protection are obstacles for regional development. And especially in the Swedish case, and we also know that the state investigation is ongoing on how to develop further the shoreline protection regulations. From Härjedalen in Sweden, they are having trouble with the shoreline protection, and that they try to work with the environmental regulations or environmental law that prescribes the shoreline protection, and give these types of motivations for exceptions from the shoreline protection. So from my understanding, it seems like they are working around the obstacles, but I think, Johannes, that you talked to the planners in Härjedalen, you maybe can feed into that.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, here I am. Yeah, that seemed to be quite big issue in the discussions with the interviewees when I was in Härjedalen, especially when talking to the planners about the shoreline protection that exists in Sweden and some other Nordic countries as well, like Finland. But there are some instruments, as you're probably aware of, that you can use this kind of pinpointing areas for rural development where you can build or give exceptions to the shoreline protection. And that's something that they have worked with a lot in Härjedalen. And we know thanks to, I mean, in the recent years, a lot of building permits has only gone to second homes. So of course, you can be have a critical perspective if you have a competition on the housing market between second homes and permanent homes, and most building permits are only second homes. If that is thanks to shoreline protection, I'm not sure, but it can be challenging at the same time, allowing for only maybe second home development thanks to that.
Yeah, and if I should put on my environmental hat as a background in social environmental science, I also think that it's important to state also to answer the Mark and Tuan's question here. What is the goal exactly with the shoreline protection regulation? And as we haven't focused on that particularly in this case for all the Nordic countries, I can only answer from Sweden is the laws that I know the best. And the exact goal is to protect the water catchments. So it's the regulation is that you're not allowed to build as a rule for 100 meters close to waters of any kind. So it's around the sea coast, it's around lakes, and it's around streams. And if you should be allowed to do that, no, I think or maybe is it still on?
I can see you.
Okay, it's still on. Okay, so if you are should be allowed to do that, you have to make an exemption from the rule in the planning legislation. So let's see, we'll take another question here. See if we can address this. It's from Denmark. It's Marianne. She says, in Denmark we are experiencing challenges with new super-sized second homes, kind of small hotels, and that accommodates 25 to 40 persons. Any similar experience in other Nordic countries? Yes, it is, and I think maybe we should switch places, Johannes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Not interrupt our computer. I don't know if we have. In the Icelandic case, there are also some challenges with large second homes being built, and if it wasn't clear if that's due to people with money building them or if it was due to maybe increased tourism, I don't know. But they have experienced like large second homes being built, and they're trying to regulate that in spatial planning because by regulating the size of the land plot, because according to the Icelandic legislation, you have a maximum number of square meters based on the plot size of the plot. So what they're trying to do in Grimnes and Grafnisrepper is to keep the land plot for second homes as small as possible or regulate it to some extent. But of course, it can still be quite large second homes being built, maybe not for 25 to 40 persons, but according to the regulations in Grimnes and Grafnisrepper, it can be probably houses between 300 square meters, a bit more. I'm not exactly sure about the number, but it's in our report. So yeah.
But it's the same from Finland, right? For the Pargas as well. We also have indications. But we have indications on the sizes and the new super-sized second homes that there are existing. Yes. For instance, then in Denmark, as you say, Marianne, but also in Iceland and in Finland as well.
Yeah,
but here, as Johannes pointed out, that the planning, detailed planning, are used to regulate the sizes of it.
And I can also mention that the planners in Härjedalen were saying, like, okay, they've seen in just recent years, like maybe the last 2 years, that the building permits for second home has decreased, but their explanation for that is that they're building small apartment buildings instead. I mean, maybe not apartments for 20 to 40 persons, but maybe 2-3 apartments in one second home. So of course that is something going on as well. So it's a bit tricky, and it goes back to what Elin was saying before, that just by visual elements, it's difficult to tell what a second home is nowadays. So yeah, that's also one answer to that question, basically.
Mm.
Should we go? Should we change seats again?
There are more questions above as well.
Okay,
Yes, we took that one.
this one.
Yeah.
We have another one from Marianne. It's information. It's in Denmark. It is possible to live in your second home as your permanent home after 1 year of ownership, and if you are retired above a certain age. Yeah.
That is correct.
That's good to validate the what we know as well. That's good. Going to Torun Kornstad, she said, the mountain region network in Norway will be working with the question of dividing the taxes after an initiative from the municipalities in Gudbrandsdalen. Oh, that's interesting to hear, Torun. We actually discussed this when I was in Hamar in Norge in maybe it was early last year. So I'm glad to hear that you will continue to work on this issue, if that could help, and we'll see how it will turn out. Hanna-Mari Kummunen writes, thanks for the answers. In Finland there was a survey about double municipality residents, and then she continues in Sweden. It's a link to this survey about the possibilities to have a double municipality residence. That's very good. Thank you, Hanna-Mari. That was also something that came up during the interviews with the official worker in the Pargas municipality, that to change the legislation one of the planners there, the person there with interview, she stated that would be a gold mine for us as a second home municipality if it was possible to change the legislation in Finland. So that's interesting that they also have a survey on that.
We keep the link, I guess.
Yeah. Could look at the link later. That's excellent. Let's see.
Further up.
One shows the impact of recreational
What was it?
No.
Down.
Down?
Yeah.
Where am I going?
Här. In DK.
That.
We explain transfer. No, the one below.
Okay. Is this one?
Yeah, with the recreational areas. Yeah.
Marianne from Denmark says that one challenge is the impact on the recreative areas. 2 plots are being combined.
I expect this is related to the supersized second homes, perhaps, which is very interesting.
That's of course another dimension to it. Region Gotland says that in Sweden the seasonal houses are not subjected to the same regulations of accessibility and energy use as permanent housing. Have you studied the impact of that?
No. We haven't looked at that directly.
No, not directly. No, that's true. We have come into that in this national overviews in some way, that you have this, as I mentioned during the presentation, that you have the framing of the legal framework for the second homes and seasonal tourism, that it differs a bit, and it's not. That is also something that is mentioned in the interviews as challenging in that sense, that if you want to turn your second home into a permanent home, you have to change the standard of it, because the regulations for a permanent home, it's much higher when it comes to accessibility, energy use, and standard, and so on. So that can also be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. And I'd like to add things to that as we also were saying before, that in some Nordic countries, and maybe from my experience in Iceland, Icelandic case and the Swedish case, was that the design, especially of new second homes, are quite high, and I guess that they are actually following the regulations that would work for a permanent home. So that could also be challenging, because then you have some second homes that are could work as permanent homes and the other way around. And on the housing market situation in Sweden, where you can register in your second home and turn it into a permanent home, that could also create competition on the housing market, which was indicated in the case of Härjedalen, where some permanent homes also are being used as second homes, and the other way around. So yeah.
Of course, yeah.
But we haven't looked into the impact of that in detail.
No, that's some intricate questions, of course. Marianne says that in order to make room for the big houses and trees, to make room for the big houses, trees are knocked down. Okay, yeah, that was also something that was, of course, but it was mentioned that these new types of establishments are having negative impacts on the ecosystem services or the ecosystems and the landscapes, that these new constructions are then influencing the possibility to, for instance, preserve the wild reindeers in Norway. That was something that is problematic or mentioned as problematic. So, and that is, of course, something that us as researchers, we can make it visible that this is happening, but then it's up for the politicians to decide to prioritize what to use this land for and when to use it and so on. So the important thing is, as I see it, is important that they can use this spatial planning tool and the land use regulations to make sure that the land use, the maps are used in that sense. You have zones for different types of purposes to connect, to ensure that the wild reindeer can still walk through the landscape, but at the same time ensure that people have new homes. I mean, that's also that is something that is conflict over land use. That is regardless if it's in an urban area or a rural area, but it just takes different types of perspectives depending on where you are. And we had another question here. Sorry, it was Mark Antoine. It says, are you aware of any socioeconomic divisions between who owns a second home and who does not? Annual salary, country of origin, type of employment? That's a question I have to think a bit about. Let's see. We don't have it on this. We don't have this type of statistics on a Nordic combined level. We have it in different ways. We have it on the. Each country have statistics, but in different ways, and it's in different forms. So that's why we haven't been able to harmonize the statistics for all the Nordic countries combined, for the Nordic region. But we have, of course, references in the report that can be used to find the statistics for each and every country, if that is something that you would look into further. Yeah.
But we can also add one thing based on the literature review that you did in the beginning of the study, Ellen, was that in the Nordic countries, isn't the half of the population has access to a second home, which then means that it's probably spread over those kind of different categories. But of course, that kind of changed since the studies were done. So it would be interesting to have an updated, harmonized statistical analysis of the ownership of second homes in Nordic countries. But there are indications saying that actually a lot of people in the Nordic region have access to second home.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true that in that sense that we have the estimations on the Nordic level that half of the population have access to a second home, and that makes us then argue that not half of the population is affluent. So it's not only for the richest people that have access, but we haven't any indicators on this harmonized Nordic level at this stage to make sure who is owning in the second homes and so on. But it is existing on the national statistics bureaus and other research groups among the Nordic countries. Okay, let's see. Should we try to go into any more discussions? Do you think so?
Yeah, we can ask if someone else has one more question to ask, because we have no more questions in the comment.
But then again, we have 8 minutes left.
Okay, so then we go to the...
Should we start that? Yeah, that's true. Sorry. Should we start this one then? Take this one?
We can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Time to do that.
But
yeah.
we only have 8 minutes left.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so thank you so much for this session on questions and comments. We also have prepared some discussion topics, and we don't have much time left on the 2 hours, but we will start off, and I'll let Johanna start, and then we will break after 8 minutes and see how it goes. Yeah, let's see. Where do I find this window?
Yeah.
Is it this one?
Yeah.
And I'll leave the word to Johannes then.
Can you see me? Oh, no, it's just showing the... Okay. So this was just some brainstorming thing that came up to as our mind when we were looking, especially maybe to the Icelandic and all the cases, but especially to Icelandic and the Swedish case. For instance, can there be some gentrification due to mobile population? Because in our study and in our interviews, a mobile population is mainly described as positive for local and regional development, even though it poses, of course, challenges that we have talked about earlier today for the municipality and for spatial planning. In Iceland, the massive international tourism that has increased only during the last 5-10 years has enabled a market for second home rentals where many second homes are being rented out to international tourists. And there are regulations in place limiting the maximum number of days for rentals at the moment to 90 days during 1 year. In Härjedalen in Sweden, the interviewers were describing a competition on the local housing market between second homes and permanent homes. Perhaps both these examples can be viewed as some kind of tourist gentrification or perhaps mobile population gentrification due to second homes. So what we would like to open up for discussion, and maybe someone you can comment on that based on your experiences, is do you agree with this description? Are there any other risks that you can see that are related to this? Should the inflow of massive tourism, increase second home rentals, and competition between second homes and permanent homes be regulated? If yes, how? If no, why not? And should these regulations consider maybe territorial variations within countries or even within municipalities? So we're trying to open up for questions, or?
So we'll put the questions in here.
Yeah. And if someone wants to maybe say something or add a comment by talking to us, we can maybe open up for your microphone to let you say something.
Thomas, would you like to ask a question verbally to the group?
But if you have Thomas has raised hand. Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear me now, or how does this work?
Now we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Thank you for interesting aspects of the second home. I think that would be. There are several valuable studies, of course, to go on with. And your question is interesting in terms of gentrification. Of course, I think it does affect, and you have to think about it. And I know, as we're in a project with Härjedalen municipality, they need to find solutions. But it's also a question, if you have second homeowners moving to their second homes, you will get the age, demography will not be improved in peripheral areas. Have you discussed that?
Yeah, was quite an interesting aspect, of course, if retired people or elderly people are moving to the second homes and we allow for that. I can only tell that in Härjedalen there were some challenges in regards to competition to keep the youth population in the municipality can be related to increased housing prices in some settlements, maybe the tourist settlements, due to second homes being people from especially the Stock Capital region are buying second homes there. So there are also posing some challenges to keep maybe the youth population in some settlements, and you're also raising that people are moving. Maybe elderly people are those who wants to turn it into a permanent home, and maybe the youth population not even can stay. That can create some demographical challenges, of course, and I think we are addressing that in our report, but we don't really have any straight answer to how to handle it. Rather, that we should start a discussion, maybe also from different level of government, how to solve this issue. Because, of course, second homes are seen as an asset for the local economy, but as you're addressing it, it also creates some maybe demographic challenges.
And hi, Thomas. I can add a little from Denmark. In Oslo, they recognize the fact that it is mostly people who are retired that will move into their second homes, but that even though they maybe are elder, people today are very active when they retire. And therefore, even though they may not bring direct income taxes to the municipality, they bring a lot of social fabric. And many of them work as volunteers. They bring life to the municipality. So they definitely saw that there were potentials in this, even though maybe not direct economic potentials. Maybe, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so with that, I think that our time is up, unfortunately. So, from myself and my colleagues, I want to thank you so much for engaging in this seminar and listening in. And we are glad that you took your time to listen and to write your comments and questions. And we didn't have much time for this discussion at the end, but we hope that the discussion will continue in other forums, and that you will continue to have a lovely day and a lovely week.